Right, I was going to say good morning, it's good afternoon, and it's Tuesday, the Wednesday after the Tuesday interview of Willie Donaldson that you very kindly took part in. James, Jimmy, Jim, what is it?
Well, a lot of people, as you might expect, call me Jimmy over here. My mother called me Jimmy, but everyone else calls me Jim.
So, Jim MacGillivray, and you very kindly sat down in front of us here in the National Piping Centre again for an interview for Pipers'Persuasion.
Thank you. Thank you for
So, without any further ado, Jim, I think we'll just get into the fray. So, understand you're not Scottish, you're Canadian, but plenty of Scottish forebears. And we'll just mention where you're staying, and then that gets that one out the road. Kitchener, Ontario was where you were born, but you're residing where?
I was actually born in Stratford, Ontario, which is about 30 miles west of Kitchener. Kitchener is a very German town in the middle of southern Ontario, about 70 miles west of Toronto. During the Great War, it was known as Berlin. And halfway through the Great War, they thought maybe they should change the name. So it was a very German town, a very unusual place to end up playing bagpipes.
And what about the General Kitchener and the British First World War General? Is that where it came from?
That's clearly who it was named after, yes.
That's quite a switch in titles from German to
from Berlin to Kitchener, yeah. Yeah, it turned out to be a good idea, I think.
Okay, that's that one out the road. Right, how did you start? You started at 11 years of age, which is a great age for us all to start piping.
Yes, I was. It was really on the whim of an 11-year-old, I think. I mean, I had Scottish heritage. My father's people were from Mull near Pennygale, came over and were Ontario pioneers in the mid-1840s. My mother's people were from Glasgow, the Gorbals. So there was lots of heritage there. Oddly enough, one day a gentleman came to the front door of the house, very German, selling accordions.
Mm-hmm.
And you would buy the accordion, and along with the accordion would come a series of lessons. Well, it was the first musical instrument I'd ever touched, and he let me hold it and play a few keys, and I thought it was fantastic, and I told my mom and dad I wanted to learn the accordion. Well, they really didn't think much of their Scottish heritage wee boy learning the German accordion, so they put the kibosh on that.
Okay.
And I think shortly after that I thought, well, I want to learn an instrument. I better learn one mom and dad love. So my dad, there was no piping in the family. My dad loved the pipes. We used to go to the Fraser Highlanders games every year. He had the most horrible pipe band album in the basement, made in the late 1950s when they were on vinyl with a little hole in the middle. It was cracked from the hole to the outside, but I thought it was fantastic. And I said, that's what I want to learn, and I immediately got full support from my mum and dad.
Okay. Right, that's great. And your first teacher was?
My first teacher was a Legion piper, a Glasgow man living in town named John McIntyre. Not a piper of note, but he knew the basics well, and he taught me how to practice. I would sit in that room of his, and if I didn't have something right, he would stand and look out the window while I played it over and over and over again until it was right.
Do you remember your first tune?
My first tune, I believe, would have been Morag of Dunvegan.
My goodness, there you are. A nice tune too.
And it was very quickly after that, somehow we graduated up to the 2-4 March leaving Glenurquhart.
Well, that was a quick one, nice.
Yeah, he was a fast tracker. Once I knew the technique, he said, let's go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and how long were you on the practice chanter before the bagpipes then?
I started the practice chanter in March of 1966, and I got my first set of pipes 11 months later, February 67.
Okay. And fast forwarding to today, you teach today. How quick do you put your average pupil on to a bagpipe?
Well, that's a bit of a special situation. I'm not actually doing any private teaching of beginners, but I teach piping at a boys' private school in Aurora called St. Andrew's College, which has a strong Scottish history and a cadet corps. So we start middle school boys age 11, 12 as beginners in September. they have a lot of other activities they can be involved with. So it's really crucial that we move them along quickly and get them on pipes as quickly as possible. So we can sometimes start boys in September, and we can sometimes have them on pipes in January sometimes, but usually February or March. So 6 or 7 months, faster than I normally would, but that's more out of necessity than anything.
I always sort of took the view that they were learning to play the Great Highland bagpipes, so as soon as I could get them on the instrument physically, you know, as long as they were size-wise okay.
Yeah.
But if they're not, then that's a big constraint too.
No, and what I've learned is that the young kids today have so many competing activities. They're video games, and if you lose their interest, you lose them.
Aye.
And I've learned that once you get them on the pipes, if you've left some holes in the program, you can fix them.
Yeah.
But if you lose them after 3 months, they're gone.
It's too late.
Yeah.
It's too late. So, going back again, spinning back, you had this teacher, and that was John McIntyre, and then you went to the Kitchener Legion Pipe Band under Pipe Major Colin Miller. How about Colin?
Colin was another Glasgow man. In fact, Colin's son, Colin Jr., was lead drummer of some good Grade 1 bands, Toronto District Grade 1 band in Ontario. Again, Colin was not a good player, but he was great with the kids. We had a kids band, and Colin took us out in the field and got us enthused about piping, and we won lots of Grade 3 contests in Southern Ontario. So that lasted for about 3 years, and as often is the case in Legion situations, there was some infighting went on, and all of a sudden one day the band dissolved.
It was gone.
Aye.
And at that point, my as I mentioned, I was born in Stratford,
Yes.
which happened to be the hometown of Ed Nye.
Aye.
And my mother had been taught in high school by Ed's father.
There you go.
So she had a connection there,
Uh-huh.
and we happened to run into the Guelph pipe band somewhere, and my mother suggested to boldly went up to Ed Nye and said, "I think my son should play in your pipe band."
Good.
So Ed said he would have a listen to me, so I went out and I played for Ed. I think I played a Marshall Spain reel. I think I played Dougal McCall's Farewell to France, Maggie Cameron, and Alexis McGregor.
Uh-huh.
And he said, "You're in."
Good.
So that was that. They were a Grade 2 band at that point, the Guelph band.
Uh-huh.
Guelph is about 20 miles from Kitchener.
Okay.
So that was the start of a very extremely productive and crucial 10-year relationship with Ed as my teacher. So he immediately started teaching me as a solo player. He was already making trips over here. He had spent a year here.
Yeah.
And he started me into Pembroke, and that was really the start of my competitive career.
And we'll come back to that in a second. I want to explore Ed Nye because nobody in Pipers'Persuasion interviews has spoken of Ed Nye. And I think it's worth at least a few minutes, because I know he's a stalwart and a giant in Canada and is very much revered, etc. Can you tell us about Ed, please?
Yes, I can. Ed passed away just a year ago, 2 days ago. In fact, I gave his eulogy on the day of the World Championship last year. Died too young at 70. Ed started his piping in Ontario in the early 1960s with the Perth Regiment in Stratford, and then moved to the St. Thomas Grade 1 band, which was run by a fellow named Gord Tuck, which a lot of people might have heard of, a tremendous sound man, and he ran a great band. So that's really where Ed got his grounding as a bandsman and as a young soloist. He got bitten by the Scotland bug quite early, before really people were making the trips. Back then, you didn't just pick up and climb on an airplane and go to Scotland. You had to have good reason to go.
Roughly date
66,
was
67.
the mid-60s.
Yes, and he spent a year over here, I believe, in around 1967, and he became involved particularly with John McFadden.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit with the Muirheads Band and Bob Hardy, and he competed, and he really got to know the scene over here.
Okay.
And then at the same time, Bill Livingston was becoming involved in the Scottish scene, and for us in Ontario, Ed and Bill were really the trailblazers
Yeah.
to start to come over here and compete on a regular basis. So Ed also introduced me to John McFadden. John used to come to Southern Ontario and do summer schools down at the farm of Matt Campbell in southwestern Ontario, schools that were originally organized by John Goodnow of Detroit. And I spent 5 years, as did Bill Livingston, as did Ed, his brother Jeff. There were some good Ontario players who went to John McFadden schools for 2 full weeks for about 5 years. And they were tremendous schools because they were very small. Some years there would only be 7 or 8 of us there, and you would get a good 2 45-minute sessions one-on-one with John every day, and that had a tremendous influence on all of our playing. So Ed's ties to Scotland early on were really valuable for me.
And then he moved on from that. How did they develop in the future from that?
Well, Ed was Ed was a tremendous teacher. He was very analytical, and he was able to break down anyone who spent time with Ed. He was able to break down. It was a tremendous learning experience sitting in band practices in the Guelph Pipe Band, because we were kind of out of the mainstream. We were far enough from Toronto. We didn't pick up the good Toronto players. We had to make our own players.
How far away?
75 miles.
Right. Okay.
Back in those days, that was far enough.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But we didn't have good players. But to sit on the table and listen how Ed would break down the phrases and teach these players how to make the music was a tremendous learning experience for me. I mean, I learned a lot about solo playing from listening to Ed run band practices. So we have a thriving grade 2 band and then a grade 1 band. We won the North American Championship in 1976 and again in 1981. And then at that point, after 10 years, I was pretty heavy into the solo circuit at that point. I was ready to go to Scotland. Ed wanted to leave the band, which he did. He retired, and I took the band over for a year. And we won the North American Championship, but I didn't enjoy it. And I was ready to start.
Any particular reason?
I was ready, really. Part of it was time. I was ready to start chasing the gold medals.
Yeah.
I had a busy job, and I didn't like the people politics of the band. Well, maybe any band at that time.
Yeah.
You know, that's what the piping part of it was great. We could get a good sound, we could play well, but it was the people issues that woke me up at night, and I didn't enjoy that.
Was it egos or
Not
envy or anything like
not
that?
really. I shouldn't say this, but we were one of the first grade 1 bands. I believe we were the first grade 1 band to win the North American Championship with female players. So we were one of the first bands who was introducing women into the pipe band.
Yeah.
Young women.
Yeah.
And young men. And that comes with its own set of problems.
Of course. Okay.
So after a while, I said, you know what? I'd rather just play P-Brick.
Aye.
So I just said, you know, Ed, I'm sorry, but I think I'm gonna back out, and I'm gonna spend my time going to Scotland. And he came back and took the band over again.
Right. Okay.
And so that sort of ended my formal time with Ed. And very shortly after that, around 1981, I went to a piping school that Neil Dickey ran in Sackville, New Brunswick. And I met Jim Kilpatrick was there, I remember, and I met Andrew Wright.
Okay.
And Andrew and I took to each other right away. And I was spending noon hours as sort of a junior instructor. I got a small bit of pay, but part of the pay was you got an hour lesson from the senior instructor, who was Andrew.
Excellent.
And that was very fortuitous for me, because as a student and teacher, Andrew and I hit it off like that. And that began a several-year relationship with Andrew, where every year Andrew would send me tapes of the set. He was very generous. He'd send me tapes of the set tunes. I would record them, send him tapes back. He would send tapes back with feedback. When I came over to Scotland to compete, I would go over to the house and play a little bit for him. And I'm not the only person Andrew did that for.
No,
Andrew did that for a
Andrew's
lot of
very
players.
good and studious. And,
Yes.
has done a lot of work. In fact, there is, I have interviewed a very, very good interview with himself. You know?
Yes.
And I can understand where you're going from. You mentioned John McFadden. How would you compare John as a teacher with Andrew Wright?
Well, a different.
Maybe a wee bit improper kind of question. I don't
No,
know.
no.
Everybody's got different
I wouldn't
styles.
want to.
It's only styles. I'm not talking about quality here.
Yeah,
I'm
very
talking-
different personalities.
Yeah.
For one thing, when I was going to John, I was a kid. I was
Aye.
15,
So you're much younger.
16, and it was very much that kind of a relationship. You know,
Yes.
John was a school headmaster.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way he ran the school with the kids. So John was strict and a little bit arrogant, and
Fun enough, I found them exactly the same way because they taught me at that age.
yes,
The exact same age. And I must say I had differences with him, personality-wise, but you couldn't fault where he's come from with his bagpipe. It was a great bagpipe.
Yes.
You can still visualise it yet. And also his playing, his Pipers'Persuasion playing and all the rest.
absolutely. And John's teaching style was to direct you through the tunes.
Yeah.
And-
Whereas Andrew,
Andrew never directed me through anything. We sat with a practice piano or singing, and we talked through the nuances.
you talk about the thing.
Yeah, but John, there was very little talking. You stood up in the bag. But the first day of the first summer school I went to, I'd only ever had one Pipers'Persuasion from Ed, which was Black Donald's March.
Okay.
And John handed me the McGregor salute. He basically went through a line of each variation. That was 9 a.m, and he said, when you come back for your 3 o'clock lesson, I want you to play that on the bagpipe from memory.
Mm-hmm.
And in 6 hours, I learned the McGregor salute. And I had a few wee slippies, but I played the tune. So John, that was John's style.
Straightforward tune, would you describe it as?
Yeah, well, yes, yeah, pretty
Aye.
much. And then he'd get the hand going, and he would direct you, and he forced music out of you that
Aye.
I've never really forgotten.
Aye.
You know, very
Uh-huh.
bold. And one of the other very valuable things that happened, and I try to do this with my students, is John, at the end of each 2-week school, John had to do a recital in Detroit.
Right.
He didn't have much time to practice. So he would hand us his bagpipe, his 1912 silver and Ivory Hendersons, and he would say, James, would you please go and give that a wee blow? And I'd go, yes, sir. And you went and you got to play John McFadden's solo bagpipe for an hour. And that was an education.
Yeah.
How free and vibrant and easy and sweet and steady it was. That 5 minutes on that bagpipe was more valuable than 24 hours of someone talking to you on how to get a bagpipe going.
He handed me the same bagpipe at the same age, and it was up in Tyree, College of Pipe and Summer School, and said, I'm playing at Tobermory in a few days' time, would you give these a blow? And just before I left, one thing he says, don't stop the drones. Tune all the drones at the one time. Never stop any of the tenor drones or anything like that. So that's when I learned to tune 3 drones, and I've kept that going ever since.
Mm-hmm.
But that was John McFadden that did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And that was a really valuable lesson there, because you had to listen to the drones and just tune the 3 of them at the same time.
Yes.
Without closing them off. He didn't mention anything like that to you.
No,
so-
not at the time. He just wanted us to get some moisture in them. And
Yeah.
I don't think he was doing it for us. He was doing it for
Oh,
him.
for himself.
But it was
aye, what?
fantastic for us.
At those schools, there were people like Bill was there, Ed Nye was there, John Goodnow was there, and you would hear these guys practicing. You were just totally immersed for 2 weeks in Pipers'Persuasion and Mentorship reels with good players.
Aye.
And it was just a tremendous experience.
Okay, so that's you've got your grounding and very good teachers, and they've taught you how to play tunes. And you've left the band, now you're about to attack the solo circuit. Tell me about that.
Well, any success I've ever had as a piper has been due to hard work and preparation and practice. Which is, I've always, so many of the top good pipers I know of were not child prodigies. They were not the mounds of talent you see in some of the kids today. They were the people who thought the hardest, and work the hardest. And I was one of those. So as so many, you know, the Scottish players used to be very impressed with the Canadians back in the 70s and 80s because we played technically so well, we seemed so well prepared. But to us, we were using all of our vacation and all of our expendable finances to make these trips. We were going to be prepared. You're not going to make that commitment if you're not ready to take to at least contend for the big prizes. So,
What age were you when you went into that solo circuit then?
Well, that would be sort of
Seriously, I mean.
1980. So I played for the first time in Scotland in 1974 when I was 19. I played in the gold medal. I played at Sky, and then I didn't compete again over there until 1981. So I was
What were you working at? What was your?
Well, I was in school. I was an English major at home. So I was really I started to make the trips to Scotland after I graduated and had a full-time job and really could afford to make the trips.
Okay.
And then I'd come over and I really never did the games circuit. I was pretty well stayed with.
So you stayed with the major Argyllshire Gathering, Inverness,
and the Northern Meeting.
How many times did you compete there, Argyllshire, before you get the medal?
The first time I played seriously, I mean, once they started the silver medal thing, the first time, 1981, I played in the silver medal at Oban.
Okay.
I played McGregor's Salute. I thought I played as well as I could play it, and I got nothing. 2 weeks later, I played Battle of the Pass of Crieff in the gold medal at Inverness, and I was third. Okay. So that got me out of the silver medal. And then, so that was 1981. Then I won the gold medal at Inverness in 1985.
Excellent. What did you play?
I played McDougall's Gathering.
Big tune?
Yeah. Well, not a long tune, but it's considered
it's difficult.
A challenging tune, yes.
Yeah.
And then I was lucky enough.
Now, who taught you that?
Well, Andy and I. Andrew and I.
Who was on the bench?
John McFadden was in the middle of the bench, and I had a, you know, when I was going over in the mid '80s as well, I made a connection with John because Captain John was really good to the Canadians as well, and I didn't see John a lot, but I went over to the house in Edinburgh a couple of times, played light music, mostly light music for him because I liked John's aggressive approach to the light music, and he and I exchanged a few tapes. So I wouldn't say I spent a lot of time with John McFadden, but I spent enough to be, I would say I was pretty strongly influenced, particularly in the light music by John. So he was in the middle of that bench. I like to think the connection is not why I won the gold medal.
Not at all. No,
but,
that would be saying bad things about John, because John wouldn't give you a prize unless you were due.
No. And I think also on that bench was James Burnett and what they called Donald McLean.
I know you.
From Glasgow, I think.
Yeah.
So those three. And then, so I actually had a very short competitive career in Scotland. I mean, my last.
So it was 85 there.
That was 85.
Medal. And the other medal?
The other medal, well, I won the clasp in Inverness in 87.
Playing?
Donald Ban McCrimmon.
Big tune.
I had been lucky enough the year in 1986. I won one of the light music events at Oban, and then I won the March of Spain Reel at the Glenfiddich.
Right.
And then at that point, I think I played in the clasp. I think I played in 88 again, and then I can't remember what happened, but I all of a sudden I sort of lost a bit of my drive, and I was still coming over and playing, but I can't say that I was taking it as seriously as I had been. And by 1989, I kind of felt like I didn't want to do this anymore. I'd won some big prizes. Again, the financial commitment and the commitment in time is major. And I as much as I had success as a competitor, I didn't really enjoy the process. I didn't like competing. Frankly, I didn't cope well with the anxiety. Not on stage. I played well, always played well. I responded that way. But the process was not something I really enjoyed the way you see some of the guys who've been doing it for 30 years. And I drifted away from it a bit.
But you missed the other gold medal. I'm
Well,
afraid.
yeah. Here's the end of that story. Is
okay.
I was playing with the 78th Fraser Highlanders, who I
Right.
joined in 1988,
Okay.
which was the year after they won the World
The
Championship.
year after.
So I was playing with them, and in 1991, there was a free year at Oban and Inverness, where it's 80 your own choice in terms of tunes, and Oban was 4 days after the World Championship. So I said, well, maybe I'll hang in for a week and play at Oban again,
Okay.
which I did. And I won the gold medal at Oban that year,
Excellent.
playing the big spree.
Maybe it was because the strain was off and you just.
Well, yeah, it could be. It could be. But then I came back to the Glenfiddich that year, and when I was at the Glenfiddich in 1991, I remember on the day, getting ready to play my events, and I said, you know what, this is it. I didn't say I'm going to retire from playing, but I said I'm going to stop
Yeah.
for a while. So my last competitive event was, I was 36 years old at the Glenfiddich Championship in 1991, and I've never had an urge to go back.
It's a nice way to go out, mind you, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
At the Glenfiddich.
Well, yeah.
Did you get anything that
I
day?
didn't get, no, I didn't. I had fourth and fifth, I think.
It's just pretty
That's-
creditable, even
yeah.
because
Yeah.
everyone that's on that field that day
Oh,
is.
Yeah, it's a tremendous field.
It's all your winners from the previous year.
Yeah. So really, my Scottish competing career, given that the mid '70s weren't all that serious, really was about 8 out of 10 years where I was really serious about it. So
That's pretty solid, though, eh?
yeah, I did. I was fortunate.
And during that time, what bagpipe did you play?
At that time, I was playing a set of, oddly enough, I was playing a set of circa 1949 Sinklers, which had been, I acquired, they had been owned by a fellow in Buffalo named, one of the Murchison brothers, Ken or John Murchison, and they had been made and owned by Willie Bryson,
Okay.
who worked for Sinklers and McPherson's in the late 50s. And they were apparently the bagpipe Willie made for himself. And they were supposedly, the bores were McDougall bores. And apparently Willie would make a bagpipe, play it for a few years, and maybe be a bit down on his luck, and he'd sell it. So he sold it to one of the Murchisons, and I bought that. So through those 10 years, I always said it was a silver and ivory Sinkler set.
Well, a good set.
It was a good set. I eventually retired that set in the early 90s and bought an old, I guess harkening back to John McFadden's 1912 Henderson's, I ended up with a 1912 silver and ivory Henderson. Although I don't have that bagpipe anymore now either.
That was a very good era for that type of
Yes.
bagpipe. I had a 1914 set. That I know it was 1914 because it had a plaque on the
Oh.
bass drone. So it's made for war 1914.
Wow. And of course those were back in the sheepskin and cane days.
Yeah.
Which seems like ancient history now.
And you just seem to grow up and never thought anything about bass drone reeds falling into the seasoning
No.
in the bag and just taking it, running through a tap, drying
No.
it, putting it back in.
Certainly for the Canadian player, I mean everyone has moisture issues, but certainly for the Canadian players coming over here from our more extreme climate,
Yeah.
where it's dry, it was always Bill Livingston and I talked about it a lot, it was always a sudden struggle
The
when we got
humidity.
here to have to it's not only the humidity, but it's the cooler weather. So your pipes are getting cool and the moisture is condensing inside the bores. We used to do all sorts of bizarre things. We used to buy little hair blowers,
Right.
and when you went to compete, the first thing you do is you just warm up the wood a little wee bit, so that they'd last a little wee bit longer. But I was very grateful when the canister systems came out, because I was a very wet blower and always had trouble with moisture. So
I was speaking about that. It's raining just now. This is Wednesday, and Friday morning's the qualifiers for the World Pipe Band Championships.
yes,
And pipe majors will really be worried because it's atrocious weather it's forecast for Friday morning.
yes.
And we're first on the police band. So, are you playing with the Spirit?
I'm not playing. No, I'm not playing with the Spirit. I played with the Spirit in 2008.
Yeah, you did.
Yep.
Tell us about that. I've mentioned it, so run with it.
What an experience! I have the Spirit. Roddy gave me this tie this morning.
Okay.
That came up at the Glenfiddich in the fall of 2007. And a few of us had always talked informally about what would look at all the guys good players who aren't attached with bands right now. What the heck would happen if you decided on a repertoire, gave all these guys the tunes in the fall, and said, learn it, and then had them show up on the Saturday before the World Championship and practice your hearts out for a week? What do you think would happen? And at the Glenfiddich that year, Roddy was there, and Willie, and myself, and Angus McCall, and Ian Spears, and Colin McClellan, and we started talking about this, and we said, well, what do you think, Roddy? And next thing, it was happening.
Aye.
So I think what was most telling in that band was not just the quality of the players you had. Wasn't just that. It was that you had a bunch of guys who knew what it takes to win.
Right.
Knew how good it has to be to win. So what the most amazing part of that was, when I showed up the week before the World Championship in Glasgow, we had a practice here upstairs that Sunday afternoon, and Roddy said, let's get the practice chanters out first. There were 22 pipers. We were still shaking hands with, oh, good to see you. I didn't know you were playing. Good to see you. 22 pipers sitting around in chairs, and Roddy said, well, let's get the practice chanters out and let's just play the March of Spades and Reels through. So we all sat, Roddy said 1, 2, and we played a March of Spades and Reel. There was not a piece of music anywhere in sight. And that March of Spades and Reel was played from start to finish without a mistake, and it was the best I'd ever played in. Mm-hmm. And I thought, these guys know how to win.
Yeah.
Everybody was prepared.
Yeah.
And that was really the story of that band. And that year, it was a fantastic experience. Although, at the time, there was a lot of talk about what the band expected, but really our goal that year, as anyone in the band will tell you, let's just see if we can get through the qualifier.
That's the first, into the first 12 of the finals in Saturn.
Yeah, so we had to
managed that.
We had to be one of the 5. So as you can see in the video, in the on the day film, that we're all in the pub having lunch, and when they announced that we were in the final, there's a big whoop like we just won the World Championship, because that was really the goal. After that, it was all gravy. So it's really one of the most fantastic piping experiences I ever had in my life. And we had this film crew chasing after us, and they were, John and his boys were a bit of a nuisance, but when the film finally came out,
very good film.
It's a wonderful memory of that week for us.
So that's us. We've been round the Fraser Highlanders. You enjoyed that 78 Fraser Highlanders?
Yes,
you did enjoy that.
I did. A lot of my friends were in the band, and it was just great camaraderie. It wasn't the best 5 years the band ever had, but the group of guys were my kind of guys. It was a very fruitful time for me in terms of composing.
Concerts though.
We did concerts.
Very successful concerts.
Yeah, we did concerts, and it was fruitful for me as a composer. I've only composed a small number of tunes, and I did them all during that period, and I've never done anything since. And 2 or 3 of the tunes I composed then have become quite popular. It was a very creative.
Can you name them?
Duncan McGillivray, Chief Steward, the 6/8 March that seems to be played a lot.
Excellent. Yeah.
A jig called Michael McDonald's Jig.
Yeah.
Which I remember Alistair Gillies telling me once that he won 5 straight jig contests playing that tune.
I think the police played that at one of the recent concerts.
Yeah. So those were the 2 that really caught on, and those were kind of written expressly because when you're playing in a good grade 1 band, you got a lot of incentive to compose because your tunes are going to get played right away. Did
you enjoy the concert side of the band?
Oh yeah, I did. In some ways, I find the competitive routine of playing in a grade 1 band can be pretty tedious. You're staying in practice, you're tuning and tuning and tuning and pounding the same stuff, breaks, play the medley, play the march with breaks, tune. It's tedious. And a lot of people will tell you that.
I just can't handle it any
No,
longer.
I think
I've had enough, and at the end of this week I'm off.
Yeah. So when a concert comes up,
the concert's great.
Yeah,
I love concerts.
It's great. It's great pressure because you're asking a bunch of people.
You're playing good music.
Well, yeah, but you're asking a bunch of people who hold full-time jobs to become professional musicians for 4 months.
Yeah.
So it's tough and it's challenging, and you're glad when it's over, but It's a
On
great
the night
experience.
though, what an experience.
Yeah, it
When you're
really
out
is.
there and you're playing nice tunes.
Absolutely.
You've
Yeah.
got other guys on stage playing along with you, maybe the odd dancer or singer or whatever. And you're able to diversify away from this
Different from the standard fare.
stultifying
Yeah.
standard fare of the competition.
Yeah.
But just to finish off the pipe band scene, you're now with St Andrews College Pipes and Drums. Tell us about that.
Well, that's the private school. I shouldn't call it a private school. It's what we call in Canada an independent school. So it's a private school that's not for profit. Any of the money made goes back into the school. So we have a cadet corps there, the 142 Highland Cadet Corps. It's the largest cadet corps in Canada, and the pipe band is part of the cadet corps. I teach piping as a high school credit course. So I have a grade 9, 10, 11, and 12 class. We teach beginners in the middle school, and we have a pipe band. The purpose of the pipe band is simply to support the cadet corps. So it's not a competing pipe band. We play a few parades outside of the school, but it's not a competing pipe band. It's pretty well an internal institution. And if you were to give us a grade, I would say we would be middle of grade 4 somewhere. But again,
you find it enjoyable though, eh?
yeah, I do. I like working with the boys, and we try to have a couple of concerts every year where I can take. We might have 22 pipers in the band. I can take my best 11 or 12 and key towards a little concert, and we can play some pretty challenging stuff with that small group. So we get to do some really interesting stuff.
What do you
as well.
do percussion-wise?
Percussion-wise, I have a fellow named Brian McHugh, who was once the lead drummer of the Toronto Police Grade 2 band. He's actually he's got a master's degree in music from McGill University. He's a good percussionist, plays pipe band snare. He teaches my
Great
drummers.
stuff, aye.
We work together, yeah.
Well, that's sounds quite exciting, especially for the kids. And if you're narrowing it down to 11 or 12 for the concert, it G's up the rest.
Yeah.
They'll need to up their game a wee bit.
And one nice thing about teaching piping is you got the practice jammer going all the time, so your hands are going.
And that leads me very nicely onto your books on tutor books on piping. Please describe that.
The first book I published was Rhythmic Fingerwork, which has turned into probably the most popular. And it's a book of a ton. I think there are about 140 exercises in the book. And that really came out, I described Ed Nye's very analytical approach to teaching. And a lot of those exercises were originally developed by Ed in terms of breaking down pieces of technique into little manageable, if people have trouble with a torlua or a doubling, if you get right down to what they're doing, you'll find out that it's not the doubling itself. They're having trouble with maybe the G grace note at the start of the doubling. And if you can find out where the problem is, okay, your problem is a G grace note.
Yeah.
On from B to C, let's fix that.
You break it right down
Break it down to that
to
small
constituent
component,
elements.
and then the doubling is fixed. So that was the concept I got from Ed from watching him teach the band players.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of exercises, and some of those I brought into the book, and then I developed a lot on my own. So when I was developing as a young professional player, I was playing all those exercises. They were key to if I wanted to, the best way I could improve my music was to improve my technique, so the technique was automatic.
And the name of the book?
Rhythmic Fingerwork.
Okay, buy it, folks. How many have you sold?
Over 20,000 now, I think.
My goodness.
Yeah. And that was followed up 2 or 3 years later. I worked with a small consortium of people. We did a couple of DVDs. One called Pipes Up, which is on bagpipe maintenance, and another called Pipes Ready was maintenance. Pipes Up was tuning. Almost 2 hours on.
That's
on
a difficult
tuning.
book to compose, that.
Well, we worked with a team. We hired a film crew. I wrote the script. We had a teleprompter. It was very professionally done.
Okay.
And it was done in stages. So yeah, it was difficult, but I get tremendous feedback, especially on the tuning video. I get tremendous feedback from people who say, I had no idea how to tune my bagpipe until I heard from you. So, and then I followed that up about 4 years ago with a Pipers'Persuasion version of Rhythmic Fingerwork, which is called Pipers'Persuasion. So that's what's out there now.
Excellent. And well, I think at this point we'll touch on your website, the tunes.
Yes. About 2004, 2005, I work in the music department of a school, and I'm noticing that the regular musicians, the concert band, whenever they need music, they just they don't have to buy a whole book of music to get one tune out of it. They just buy that sheet of music.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure I'm not the first person to think of that, but I thought through the process, and I had a typesetting piece of software that I got at school that people liked, that I learned how to use, that put out beautiful music, and I started to think this through, and I said, I should just create a website, take lots of public domain tunes, typeset them in an attractive format, good settings, record them, put them up on a website, and people can download them for single tunes for a small fee. So it was quite a monumental project, and I worked on that for about 3 years before I actually had the website built by a company and mounted all the material. And that's turned into quite a pipetunes.ca.
Pipetunes, all small case.ca.
.ca, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have contemporary composers as well. The program tracks royalties, so folks like R.S. MacDonald and Bruce Gandy and Rob Matheson, these folks are getting royalties for tunes that sell on the site.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
And we touched yesterday during Willie Donaldson's interview on the archive of Pipers'Persuasion. Just touching it again in this interview.
In some ways that's old news now because other websites have followed suit. But when I got to know Willie Donaldson after he published the Highland Pipe and Scottish Society, and he started talking about how unavailable the websites were, and he said, we need a place where we can put these. And I said, well, I may have a place where we can put them.
Okay.
So he really did the legwork, and I had my website development company. I think we mounted 4, I can't remember, maybe Angus Mackay, Peter Reed, maybe David, I can't remember which 4 it is, but I think we were, that would have been around 2008. We were maybe the first website to make some of the manuscripts.
And it's still
available.
there along with
It's
your
still
other
there.
tunes.
It's still there, and that's
So,
free. There's no
so
charge.
you've
Anybody
got
can
these
go in.
Pipers'Persuasion archives. You have the March of Spades and Reels, jigs,
Everything. Yeah.
airs, the whole lot.
Yeah.
So you've got the full panoply of piping there,
Yes.
as far as anybody's looking for a tune, no matter easy, difficult, whatever.
Yeah, mostly, certainly the heart of the public domain.
Uh-huh.
The traditional repertoire is available. And one of the nice things is that you can listen to the whole tune before you
So
decide you want to buy the music.
now it's on audio,
Yes.
and then you can buy the score.
Yeah, just buy the sheet music.
And
And you
just
can download
it and download both, I would
You can
imagine.
download the audio file. The audio file's free if you buy the music.
Yeah, so that's excellent.
And I look down at my customer list, and I'm often surprised at some of the prominent players who are on my website buying tunes. It's great.
Why not?
Yeah.
It's a great facility, and
Yeah.
the world's a small place with
And
the internet.
I enjoy doing it. And there's a section on the website with biographies of composers. So really, in the last 10 years, I've got much more interested in the history of the music. Certainly with my connections with Willie Donaldson, and then researching composers and tunes, and currently I do a lot of work with vintage pipes as well.
I'll come on to that in a wee minute.
Okay.
I want to touch DVDs.
Yes.
You brought out DVDs of your own piping.
No, the 2 DVDs I discussed were the instructional videos.
Aye, are you playing in any DVDs by Green Tracks or anybody like that?
No. Well, yeah, no, not. There's really nothing on the market now. I did a one of the world's greatest pipers
Aye.
series with Lismore, but I think it's well out of print.
Okay. What, just apropos of nothing, Duncan MacGillivray, relationship there,
The
same
tune,
name?
the tune you mean, or
No,
the person?
The
Duncan's
person.
from Calrossie.
Aye. Are you related to her?
No, Duncan and I are not related at all. But I was speaking with someone about this last night. Way back in 1981, when Duncan was playing for the Battlefield Band, I had really never been involved much in the folk music scene. Listened much to it. Pipers in folk music.
Right, go for it.
And I said, "There's a band coming called the Battlefield Band. They're coming to Toronto, playing in the Transact Club, and they got a piper named Duncan McGillivray, who is Donald P. McGillivry's son." I said, "Wow, that's great. Who is Donald P. McGillivray?" And he said, "Well, Donald P. McGillivray is one of the remaining pupils of John MacDonald of Inverness." So we went to see it. I remember sitting in the seats, and we could hear the piper tuning up in the background, and he played the Black Donald's March off in the room. We could hear he played Black Donald's March from start to finish, and I said, that was pretty good. This is a folk concert, right? And they came out, and that was the first time Duncan stayed at my place that night. I remember he got 5 hours of sleep, and he was grateful. I said, "I'm sorry we got late. You hardly got any sleep." He said, "We've been on the road for 6 weeks. That's the best night's sleep I've had since we started."
My goodness.
And that's when I said to myself, "Oh, I don't think I want that way of life."
Aye.
So that Duncan and I are no relations, but we were quite good
So
friends.
did you not go into the folk scene then?
No, it didn't. No, I didn't. It's that kind of a scene is not nearly as accessible where I live. I mean, here
Right.
you can find traditional music everywhere. In Southern Ontario, it's harder. It's just not as quite as prevalent.
But you did indulge in Scottish Smallpipes, Border Pipes, and Northumbrian Smallpipes.
Yes. I started to learn Scottish Smallpipes maybe 15 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And then I went to what is known as the Piper's Gathering, which used to be held in North Hero, Vermont. It still goes, and it's a wonderful little gathering of all kinds of of bellows blown pipes. Northumbrian small pipes, Scottish small pipes, odd European pipes. And when I went there, that's when I first became interested in the Northumbrian small pipes, which I've been a little bit on and off. Oddly enough, tomorrow, Richard and Anita Evans, Northumbrian small pipe makers, are coming here for lunch because I bought a new set of Northumbrian small pipes from them, and I'm taking delivery tomorrow. So I'm hoping to get back into that a little bit more.
I've been to Northumbria. Northumbria, what's the name of the town again?
Newcastle.
No, Pete, what's the name of
Morpeth.
the town? Morpeth.
Morpeth, yes.
Where the museum
The
is.
museum is, yes.
And because my son stays in Northumbria, in Long Houghton, and we went down shopping Morpeth, and I come across this place. I said, "I'll be back in a minute." So I went upstairs, and here was 7 dudes playing the Northumbrian pipes and having a practice for
Yeah.
like Saturday afternoon. And I sat in and that, and it was fascinating.
It's the sweetest little instrument, and what I like, it's a very cheerful music, it's nice to be able to play a repertoire that is entirely separate from the Highland repertoire, with a wider range as well.
Yeah.
In fact, you can play lots of Highland pipe tunes in the Northumbrian pipes, but I have no interest. I play them in the Highland pipes, and I play their repertoire on the Northumbrians.
It's much more suitable. See the small pipes, do you play mouth blowing or the bellows?
Bellows, yeah.
I prefer that myself.
Yeah, yeah.
And the real pipes, how'd you go into them?
That's
The
what we
border
would
pipes.
call the border pipes. Yeah. I actually don't have a set now. I've had sets on and off, and one. It's too many bagpipes to play.
I know.
I got 2 sets of Highland pipes. I got 3 sets of Northumbrian pipes. 2 sets of. So I can't keep them all
And that
going.
again is a wonderful cue in the next session. Your collection of bagpipes
Yes.
and your sale of bagpipes. You've got a wee small business going there. Describe that to us, please.
Well, I run a, in addition, Pipe Tunes website is only one. I have another website. I call it my product website, where I've carried chanters and new pipes and reeds. It's not a full service Highland supply. I work full time, so I can't be shipping out hemp and corks and things like that. But I call it a little bagpipe boutique. About 8 or 9 years ago, at the moment I can't even remember how I got. Oh, I know how I got into it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a good friend named David Waterhouse, who was a pupil of John Wilson's in the mid-60s in Ontario. John Wilson from Edinburgh.
Okay.
And John and I talked, and somehow we got talking about John Wilson's MacDougall bagpipe, which his widow Margaret still had. And David knew John well and knew Margaret well, and he said, why don't we go visit Margaret? And we went to visit Margaret, and a number of people over the years have tried to get John's bagpipe, and she was never interested in selling it. And David and I happened to get there on a day when she was open-minded. So we looked at the pipes. They were John's original silver and ivory MacDougall bagpipe that had been given to him by his uncle, the Valdoozer. And there were two, the bass drone top and cracked right through. You could see right into the bore. There were a couple of cracks in it, but they fascinated me. And she was interested in selling it. So I offered to sell it for her, and I made no profit. I just thought I'd be nice to get this bagpipe. In some ways, I wish I kept it myself, but I didn't at the time. So I sold that bagpipe for her, and that kind of got me interested. I started to learn that when a piece is cracked right through, you can repair that, so it's almost pretty much as good as new. And then I started making contact with people who I knew had vintage pipes. Roger Huth down in London I came over here one year and came back with about 5 sets that Roger had found. And that sort of got the ball rolling. So what works well for me, what makes it work, is about 90 miles away from me is a bagpipe maker in Ontario called Dunbar Bagpipes, who is a very underrated pipe making company. I think they do the best refurbishment work in the world. They can take a beat up set of sticks and make them look new. Any problem I have with a bagpipe, I was telling someone last night, sometimes I'll get an old set of Hendersons or Lorries that don't play well. You say, those aren't steady, they should be steady. And I can send them down to Rick Pettigrew at Dunbar, and he'll measure everything up, and he'll say, oh, this tenor pin was replaced at some point and it's not the right diameter. Right. They'll replace it, and the pipes are beautiful. So with a company that can do that kind of work, refinishing work, so I get the pipes, and
it saves you trying to do all the mechanics.
Well, I'm not going to.
No, you haven't got time.
So I source the pipes. They do all the work for me, and I don't hesitate to put enough money. I don't want to send pipes out to people that crack. So we make sure the pipes are in good shape. I play every set of pipes gets played. Then I try to get whatever history I can on it. I play them. I make sure they go well, and then they go onto the website with photos and descriptions. So, and that's got me quite into the history of those pipes as well.
Yeah, the provenance of the instrument is important as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Right now, the pipe, for example, I recently came across from a descendant in the eastern United States the crocus wood ivory mounted Henderson bagpipe that was Robert Brown, R.U. Brown's first bagpipe, which he acquired when he won his first junior competition around the time of the First War, and which he played until he won the gold medal at Inverness in 1928. And I've come into that bagpipe now, and I'm actually keeping that bagpipe and playing it. Who knows where that bagpipe might have ended up if it hadn't come my way. And there's been lots of bagpipes that I feel like I've rescued from obscurity, which is great. So it's part of my business. It's something that it's a source of income for me, but it's also a source of fascination. And I'm putting great bagpipes into people's hands. It's a lot of fun.
And you're obviously enjoying it. You're quite relaxed now, away from the hubbub of the competition, and you're managing your life very well with the music and still enjoying tuning the big pipe.
I love to play. I still love to play.
What's the next tune to learn, do you think?
The next tune to learn? Well, Willie Donaldson and I did our little presentation yesterday, and I decided that for about 3 months I would make myself Willie's pupil and try to seriously learn some of the interpretations that he thought might have been played in the Pibroch world in the late 1700s. That was a more difficult process than I thought, and I've gotten better at it and better at it. And I'm thinking to myself, I'd like to take a few more tunes and continue to experiment in that direction, and really make this style my own as much as I. Doesn't mean I'm going to start playing all my Pipers'Persuasion this way, but,
No,
I'd like to experiment with some more
The
tunes
thing
in
is,
that
you're
direction.
able to do that now, and you're not standing in front of people on the bench looking for their approval.
Well, no.
You know, so you're just doing it for your own pleasure.
I'll tell you what, it's amazing what you can do in piping when you don't have to practice 6 march to spades and reels twice through, and you don't have to learn 8 set tunes every year.
Exactly.
It's amazing how much more time you have to do interesting stuff.
Jim, thanks very much for your time here today. That was absolutely wonderful. I think it flowed, for me anyway, seamlessly from one subject to another. It was a pretty good interview.
Thank you, Alan.
And really, thanks very much for your
My
time.
pleasure. I've told you everything I know.
And I hope the people out there enjoy it. I know that we did here.
Thank you.
And thanks very much.
My pleasure. Cheers.
Okay, folks, listen, this is just a wee postscript, if you like. It always happens when you turn the camera off again. But we're just talking about piping today. Excuse the pun, that's the magazine for the National Piping Centre. And March of Spades and Reels, I ventured the opinion to Jim that pretty slow, lacking in music, whatever. And it's the same with the pipe bands. Where are we going with all this?
Well, as someone who judges
Yeah.
at the highest levels and has played at the top levels, you know, you get to be our age, Alan, and you know, everything we did 30 years ago was better than what we're doing, what's happening now. So I try not to fall into that trap. But you have your own opinions on it, of course. You know, when I was competing in the 1970s, a solo player would be playing marches at pretty much 72 beats per minute. And when I was seeing John McFadden, I mean, John always looked for lots of what he called go, lots of go. And I would do spades with him at 130 beats per minute.
Yeah.
And reels about what we're doing them today. Now I'm judging and I'm hearing marches that are literally 60 beats per minute, 1 beat per second.
Dear, oh dear.
Common to hear them 62, 64. I don't know if anybody's playing at 72. So, you know, who's to say that's right or wrong, or if that's just the way things are going. I mean, when we think of it now, we look back at people sometimes ask me, with Willie and I taking our approach to Pipers'Persuasion that we did, they say, you know, could these tunes really have changed that much over the course of 200 years? And I say, well, let me put it this way. If we didn't have recordings of Willie Ross, Robert Reed, and J.B. Robertson playing in the 1910s and 20s, and nobody could remember that era, and an academic like Willie Donaldson got up and played a march at 95 beats per minute and said, this is how they played marches in 1910. Would anybody believe him? We listened to those old recordings of Willie. That's the way they played.
I've got a 1958 recording that Colin gave me of his father, Captain John McFadden, playing in the officers' mess in Germany. 1958, as I said, and it's a very long recording, obviously taped and changed, you know. But the speed, and I play it in the car for Stuart and Callum when we're going up to the band practice, and we just go into knots with this, you know, because this is 100-mile-an-hour stuff. But it's all accurate, all the fingerings there.
Yeah.
And by the way, the bagpipe is excellent, truly excellent. You know, that bagpipe would be every way acceptable today, because you set up a wonderful bagpipe, John McFadden. But the 2/4 marches, went to some rate, boy.
Yeah.
and the suspension reels.
Yeah, so I suppose there's been a natural slowing down, and it's
Has it folk been careful trying to win prizes?
well, yeah, I think it's trying, and you see it more so in the Pembroke. It's people trying not one of the biggest things I see in the it's not so much about tempo, it's about engagement.
Yeah.
It's when Saturday or Friday, Monday night we did the March Span Reel. I judged the Masters March Span Reel, and it was actually a good contest. And there was quite a number of players who played with some verve. Where even as a judge, you sit up and you're engaged,
Aye.
as opposed to some people who play on the back of the beat, laid back, cautious, where you kind of lean back into the chair, and all of a sudden you're wondering what's for dinner.
Yeah.
Right, and you see this even more so in the Pembroke,
Aye.
where people spend too much time playing what they think they should play,
Aye.
as opposed to
To
what.
try play a tune.
Yeah, so even at the top levels, I mean, at a gold medal level, maybe 20 players playing, and out of those 20, I will hear a dozen tunes that that bore me.
Yeah.
Very well played, beautiful bagpipe, wonderful technique, but I'm not engaged.
Right.
So I think as a judge or as a listener,
Uh-huh.
that's all you can ask for is play with some musical commitment. Play like
The trouble is though, you know, you're sitting there, you've got to sit through all that. You've got no, you can't change your mind, walk away halfway through.
No.
But the audience will.
Yes. Yeah.
And you look around the audience halls and there's maybe a dozen folks sitting, and next thing there's 6, but you don't get them packed in a couple of hundred to listen to this fair,
No.
because it's just not doing anything for them at all.
Yeah.
So there must be a message there somewhere.
Well, yeah, I think so. And when the top Pembroke players in the world are involved in one of the major contests, and there are, you know, at 10 o'clock in the morning there are 11 people in the audience,
Yeah.
you wonder, well, what's
going
going on here? You know, and the message is clear. The message
It's
is clear.
very clear, because if you go to Brittany, you've been to Brittany.
I have not. I've never done
Okay,
Lorient.
you go to Brittany, a typical audience in Brittany is measured in hundreds.
Yes.
It's, you know, we did a concert back in April, a few months ago, in McCallum Bagpipe Roadshow, and Stuart Liddell and all the rest of them were playing at it, and it was 250 each night, and that was just small village halls.
Yeah.
You know, where did these
Unbelievable.
folk come from?
Yeah.
And they sat rapt attention. But mind you, they were listening to good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Pembroke may never be a major spectator sport, and when I look at it now, my involvement with Dr. Donaldson and the work he's doing, it's not so, to me, it's not so much a dogmatic approach. Well, we're doing it wrong, and this is the way it should be done, or the Pembroke Society this, the Pembroke Society that. For me, it's all about, can we do something to make this a little more interesting?
Yeah.
Can we bring this up to excite people a little more about the music? Because right now we ain't.
And that's a wrap, definitely this time, folks. Okay, thanks.